Welcome to the Athletic FC podcast with me, Ayo Akinwolere. This week, it's all eyes on Bilbao as Manchester United and Tottenham Hotspur meet in the Europa League final. Today, we'll focus on Ruben Amorim's side, asking, what would success mean for Manchester United? So here with us today, we have Mark Critchley and our Manchester United correspondent, Laurie Whitwell as well, who is fresh from recording Talk of the Devils. Right, Manchester United fell to their 18th Premier League defeat of the season at Stamford Bridge on Friday night, Laurie. I mean, Amorim fielded a full squad, but with a final on the horizon, I don't know if this is the best preparation at all, is it?
Well, I mean, he said that he wanted to get that competitiveness in their legs, that kind of feeling of a game, a contest to get them energised, I suppose, for what is going to be a huge occasion in Bilbao. I mean, Jose Mourinho took a totally different approach when they had the final in 2017. He basically rotated his full team. I think Pogba was maybe the one survivor from the final Premier League game to then the start in Stockholm. But I mean, United won that game 2-0, but it was a very, workmanlike, kind of quite a difficult game to get through, really. And so were they still trying to blow the cobwebs off, get the match sharpness going for the first sort of 20 minutes or so? Maybe this way United can kind of go into it at least with that muscle memory from Stamford Bridge. Okay, they lost the game still, but they played okay, I mean, it's kind of small crumbs of comfort, isn't it, for United at the moment? Clearly, Ange Postecoglou took a different approach, totally changing his team for Aston Villa. So, yeah, let's see. I can understand where Amorim's coming from. And listen, they got out of the game, didn't they, without any injuries. So they were even able to give a bit of time to Aidan Heaven, who was coming back from his own injury. And that'll be interesting because, Victor Lindelof's been playing almost by default because of the centre-back situation. So Heaven played really well when he first came into the side. Does Amorim take a bit of a gamble there and start him? I'd be surprised. I'd probably, you probably are right, Ayo. It's going to be that team that started at Chelsea that we see, I think, on Wednesday. But yeah, let's hope they can actually then put the ball in the back of the net. They've had no problem with that in the Europa League. They're like top scorers, scored in every game. So maybe it's just that flick of the Europa League anthem that gets them focused and sharpshooting.
You don't sound optimistic, but I will also say, Laurie, though, is it too simplistic? I don't want to jump on the rumour mill just to say that Man United really just got all eyes on the Europa League at this moment in time. The league, they're not going to get relegated. Let's just get it done.
Yeah, I think certainly that's been the case for, quite a lot of people at the club. I think Amorim would bristle at that. I think that was what the attempt at Chelsea was, to even just get a win, to kind of just... I mean, they scored the first goal. It got ruled out for a very slender offside. Harry Maguire, the guy. I think if United can somehow get Harry Maguire into the box in open play...
He's a winger, a striker, a defender. Yeah. I mean, so versatile.
That might be their best chance. But I think Amorim appreciates that this run of form... I mean, they've now, it's 8 games without a win in the Premier League for the first time in history. 6 defeats and 2 draws in that time. They could quite easily lose at home to Aston Villa on the final day. They're going for Champions League qualification. They're in form, and that would be a finish to the season of 2 points from a possible 27. I mean, that is horrendously bad. So I do think that Amorim's been trying to win these games in the Premier League, or at least I know he's been rotating, and clearly the Europa League final has been on the horizon for some time now, and that competition has been the priority, just because it's their obvious route to the Champions League and the finances that brings. But even Amorim has said sort of recently, I'm not actually sure whether winning it would be good or not, because I could do with a few free midweeks and getting my instructions into the players. I think if they end up losing this game, though, I think that would be a horrendous finish for United, and the questions will be deep, will be severe, will be prolonged, and so they have to try. They have to give absolutely everything to win this game.
Yeah, Critch, I mean, we talk about the form this season, and, I know you spoke to Amorim prior to the final, obviously, this Wednesday, in a press conference. Now, he keeps talking about standards. Now, Laurie's clearly stated the standard that Manchester United are at this moment in time. Where can we see this sort of improvement? Or could you just take, it's good at Europe at least?
In Europe, they've been all right, okay? I think let's take that. But it's been... Look, how many games do you think he's actually taken charge of now? I was actually surprised by this. Ooh. It's 40 games.
What?
40 days, 40 nights, 40 games.
And the abstinence of
winning matches.
Exactly. Absence of goals, absence of clean sheets. No, look, it's 40 games, right? And I think if you'd asked Ruben Amorim right at the start of when he was appointed, which really doesn't feel that long ago, but it is 40 games ago now, as I keep saying, if you'd asked him at the start and you'd asked him, how long is it going to take for us to see an idea? How long is it going to take for this to become your team? I think he would say, well, it'll probably be fewer than 40 games. In fact, I even remember him saying, you'll see an idea from the very start. You'll see what we're trying to work towards, how we're trying to change things. I think we have seen that, in all honesty. I think if you compare United tactically to how they played last season, particularly last season under Ten Hag, you've seen changes. You've seen a slower, a more deliberate style of play, tempo to the play, more care in possession. If you look at the build-up, we've seen very complex structures where centre-backs are dropping into midfield. We've seen, 3 centre-backs, right? We've seen that all the way through. He said from the start he would play that system, and he's stuck to it, and he's played it in every single one of those 40 games so far. So we are seeing a Ruben Amorim team here. We are seeing what he's trying to achieve. You could say at the same time, he's not got the squad at the minute. He's not got his players. He's not got the personnel. There's only been 2 signings. Obviously, Patrick Dorgu, first team level, become a regular starter. Aidan Heaven, as Laurie mentioned, he hadn't played a senior game for Arsenal. He's come in. He's shown promise. So there's a bit more promise there. But it's very difficult to say that it's worked, right? I don't think we can say that it's worked. Often it's been pretty horrific, right? So people would say he hasn't got the personnel. It's only going to...
Hold on, Laurie's getting food delivered as you're chatting. I mean, this is... What is this service right now?
Someone's not abstaining here. Someone's not going 40 days and 40 nights. Can't even go on podcast.
Crumpets and tea while we're talking real analytics here. What are you saying?
Let's keep that on YouTube. That stays in the YouTube version.
That stays.
I feel like I need to make some defence of my case here, but I'll let you finish first.
Let him finish.
Okay.
All I was saying was that, if I could start again, look, you'll have people who say you can't judge Amorim until he gets his players in. I understand that. I think at the same time, there is also a case that the art of management is making the most of the resources at your disposal and getting results at the same time. And whether it's because he's been so stubborn on his system, whether it's because he really believes in this style of play and wants to push it forward, he's not done that yet. And that is a problem.
Critch, I was going to go to Laurie on this question, but I've just seen he's still munching on a piece of toast. So let's move on from Amorim and talk about Hojlund, because, I mean, he yet again cut a frustrating figure as a centre forward against Chelsea. I think it's his 16th time he's not had a shot on goal in the Premier League this season. Considering there's a European final on the horizon, this doesn't look that great, does it?
No, absolutely not. And to be fair, he's not really looked like that all season. I've always been a bit of a defender of Hojlund. I think at his best last season, he looked like the type of young, raw, potential striker that could lead the United front line and had really all the attributes to do it. I think of that one of his first games against Galatasaray where he scored 2. He was continually breaking in behind the defence with pace and power and speed. And you looked at him and you thought, there's something to work with here. I don't know whether it's the intense white heat of the crucible that Old Trafford is and that playing for United is, the scrutiny that falls on a young player's shoulders. But you'd say last season, his goal record was okay. It was decent return for a young striker adapting to a new league. This season's been anything but. You point out the stat about the shots right there. I think even if you go back to last season, that's been consistent. He hasn't been getting enough shots away. He hasn't been making enough chances for himself. Sometimes you've been able to level that at his teammates and criticise them for a lack of service. I think that was true then. It's still to an extent true now. But I think the problem has gone beyond that at the moment. You're looking at a player that often looks like a shell of himself. And I remember I asked Ruben Amorim a couple of weeks ago after the game against Wolves, in which he really cut quite a forlorn figure. I said, is there not a case here? Is there not an argument, even though there's not that many options around, that you just take him out and just remove him from the situation and give him that chance to step away and take a breath and just recollect himself? Amorim was reluctant to do that, not only because he doesn't have the options, but because he thinks that, look, playing him, the only way he's going to get out of this rut is by scoring. After that, he went and scored against Bournemouth. He got the late equaliser there. He scored in the game against Athletic Club as well in the second leg. Again, they were the type of scrappy finishes close to the box that you'd want a striker who's low on confidence to be getting on the end of and scoring from. And then you were hoping he'd kick on, and he hasn't. And that's really been the story of his United career so far. I think this week, you're tempted to say that it's make or break, but it's tough to really see how he, exactly what next season holds for him, because I think a lot of minds have been made up among the support. I think United are obviously looking in the market for a new striker. I think that's absolutely necessary given what we've seen this season. And it's a very uncertain future for Rasmus Hojlund, but he's got one game in which, look, if he makes an impact, then much like United season as a whole, the whole narrative shifts, doesn't it?
Yeah. What do you reckon, Laurie? Hojlund, do you see this young man, and he's still very young, let's not forget, leading the line for Manchester United next season based on current form?
No. I would think that would be the unlikelier scenario. Although having said that, they still would, have to sell him in that situation, and that's easier said than done. Will they definitely follow through on that? Will they actually think he is a useful player to have to alternate? As Critchley said, the ability that he does have is there in certain ways. It just feels like he's been consumed by so much change and the pressure of playing up front for Manchester United, and he's second guessing himself. And at Stamford Bridge, it was again one of those performances where nothing stuck. He was kind of making the wrong movements. Fernandes was having a go at him at one point for not running in behind. Casemiro was having a go at him at another point for not holding up the ball. So yeah, it feels a difficult situation for any player, let alone someone who's sort of 22, to kind of come through. So United are looking in the market, aren't they? Clearly, Liam Delap high in priorities. Maybe they've got other options as well. Victor Osimhen's been mentioned, and Victor Gyökeres as well. So these are areas. Mateus Cunha as a number 10. I suppose it's not quite a striker, so it wouldn't necessarily displace Hojlund, but he can play there. So they are clearly focusing their energies up front, and so that means that Hojlund's future will obviously come under scrutiny. So yeah, but I mean, listen, I've got sympathy for him because I've tried to do this podcast off the back of Talk the Devils podcast, which was an epic, an hour and a half without any breakfast after a personal training session.
Here it comes.
To start the day. I've had one bite of toast this morning, and it's now it's 11:30. I was hoping it was a bit later than that, actually, to kind of really emphasise my point. But so I understand. I've been feeding on scraps. He's been feeding on scraps.
Very good. Okay.
I do have some sympathy now for him in the current plight that I am in.
Oh, Critch, he's taken that time whilst you've been chatting to come up with all of that. It's not spontaneous, trust me.
He needed a minute, though.
He needed a minute. Yeah, he did. All right. We've spoken about Manchester United's poor league form, yet in Europe, they've managed to go unbeaten, and they're the only unbeaten side left. And how has this happened? Talk to me.
I do think that this competition has just summoned something within these players, and maybe you could criticise them for that, actually, because really they should be this amped for each and every Premier League game that comes along, and clearly there's something that happens when you're able to stretch a certain sinew or run that extra 10 yards, make that tackle. I'm sure it's not a deliberate thing, but I think maybe just subconsciously that maybe drops in the Premier League when there's not this absolute pressure to perform in this moment, otherwise you're getting knocked out. We saw it in the FA Cup last season when they had that mad game against Liverpool. Obviously the FA Cup final against Man City, when they really did perform, stuck to a plan and followed it through and were too good for City on that day. So this team can summon these incredible performances, and it's been a wild ride, this Europa League campaign. It's been fantastic. I was sort of reflecting on the 2016-17 campaign and how it doesn't really resonate in my mind that much, because obviously they ended up winning that, right, and they qualified for the Champions League, and Mourinho got criticised for kind of sacking off the Premier League, really, and they ended up finishing 6th, I think. So it's quite a come down now to this point where the manager still gets his name sung on loop repeatedly, home and away. But that one didn't necessarily conjure the same emotion, because it was teams that you think United should be beating. I think it was like Anderlecht and Saint Etienne and Celta Vigo, and all the matches were a bit of a grind, only going through by like the odd goal and sort of 1-0, 2-1s, 0-0s. Whereas this has been undulations, it's been comebacks, it's been wild ride. Harry Maguire on the wing, Harry Maguire scoring, in whatever minute it was, 121st at home. Kobbie Mainoo doing a madness and, scoring from an angle. That really quality goals. Mason Mount having his sort of moment to shine with that ridiculous strike with his left foot. So yeah, it's had amazing moments, but clearly, they will probably just turn to dust if they don't end up finishing it off.
Yeah, for sure. There have been amazing moments, Critch, but also some rather unconvincing moments. You think about Twente, Porto, Fenerbahce, some draws there early on in the tournament, but inevitably Man United find themselves in yet another European final. But for you through this tournament, is there one point where you thought, actually, United look decent here? I can see them going all the way.
No. No, I'm kidding. No. Obviously, they've been much better in Europe. I think, look, you look at the results, clearly there's a demarcation between Erik Ten Hag and then post-Erik Ten Hag dismissal. As soon as they get those first 3 games out of the way, Ruud van Nistelrooy comes in, they have a very dominant win against PAOK, the Greek team, and then Amorim wins all his 4 games in the league phase as well. So there's that kind of split, if you like. If I was Erik Ten Hag, I might argue that those first 3 games are probably the most difficult ones. Certainly Porto away and Fenerbahce away. I think they were the 2 most testing games that United had in that league phase. I have to say though, I was kind of joking when I said no at the start of the answer. I don't feel like there's really been a moment where it's clicked for United in Europe as such. I think it's not like you've seen a different team in the Europa League. I think you've seen the same team in quite a different environment, in a very different tournament, if you know what I mean. I don't know what you think, Laurie, but I thought, like, for example, the Real Sociedad game, even both those games, they were up against a side who, mid-table in La Liga, not having a very impressive season, quite technical, like a lot of possession. It felt like the type of game that United really haven't come up against in the Premier League this season. Do you know what I mean? It feels like one where they have a certain physical advantage over their opponents, that they can bully them a little bit. And I thought, especially in that second leg, they dominated them. And that has been the difference, really. You've heard Amorim speak about it quite a lot this season, about how there's a slower tempo in the European games, there's slightly less intensity, and he feels as though that actually suits his players a little bit. Maybe because, I don't know, maybe the pressure's off a little bit, although you wouldn't say that about the knockout phase, because it felt like every single game's been billed as the most important of the season. But it has felt like they're a little bit more suited to this, that maybe they haven't quite met up to the physical level and the physical demands that have been going on every Saturday and every Sunday that they've been playing. But when it comes to Thursday nights, they've looked fine, and I think that's the best way of explaining it, really. But at the same time, that still opens up huge questions for actually beyond this final and into next season, right? Improving the Premier League performances is going to be the key for Amorim going forwards, as much and as brilliant as this Europa League run has been.
Even just this final, right? Because it's against an English team. So is it going to be a Premier League game or is it going to be a Europa League game?
There'll be United's record against Angers hasn't been that great this season, has it? Let's be honest.
The narratives are so incredible, aren't they?
With
him saying he always wins a trophy in his second season, with these 3 defeats already. What is it going to become this final? There's so much riding on it. I just think it's a fascinating contest, and I suppose, what kind of game will it be? I feel like it'll probably have a tinge of it being a showpiece occasion, right? That there's going to be some tension for players that haven't been at this stage before, and I think at least United have got quite a few in their midst that have been in this kind of thing. Obviously Casemiro stands out. I remember I was doing watching their open training before, I think it was the semi-final home leg, and there was rondos going on, obviously, and Casemiro's laughing and smiling, and I don't know what provoked him to say this, but he just kept on saying Champions League. Clearly some kind of game or I
think
he
thought he was still at Real Madrid there, didn't he?
Just default setting, kind of spasms into this is what I needed to do. Woken up in a cold sweat. I'm at Man United, actually. We're not in the Champions League. I think it was basically him saying, listen, calm down, guys. Don't worry, I'm here. And, you've also got Mason Mount, who's won a Champions League, with Chelsea. You've got other players that have played in tournaments and been in finals. United have got quite a few players from the 2021 final that obviously didn't go to plan ultimately, but Amad Diallo, for example, he was on the bench that day. He actually was on the bench for Rangers as well the next year at Eintracht Frankfurt, so he's had 2 losing finals, hasn't played in either of them, so I'm sure he's chomping at the bit. So I kind of feel like that'll be an interesting aspect to it all. How do these players cope with the pressure, the scrutiny? Maybe it'll be slightly more alien to Tottenham because United have lived with it the whole season. I know at Tottenham there's been a lot of pressure on them as well and scrutiny, but I don't know, I feel like maybe this is my bias, but there's always an amplification when it's United, so this is kind of standard practice for them, the kind of eyes of the world being on them. But to Critch's point, I suppose away in Bilbao, for the semi-final, but that was, I guess, coloured so much by the fact that they were down to 10 men, and they started that game really badly actually, and Lindelof was giving the ball away, which is why I come back to, does he definitely start this game? Because I think he's looked really shaky since he's come back into the side because of the injuries. But when they did, take control of that game, I think they had a good run there, and Athletic Club have been, they've qualified for the Champions League right through La Liga, so they are a good side. So I think that probably stands out as their best moment of this run.
Yeah, good one. But also, Critch, in terms of this final, should we be surprised that a team with the riches of Manchester United, especially with this squad, I mean, it's a richly assembled squad, not necessarily by quality necessarily, but they've paid high wages for a lot of players compared to Bilbao, for instance. The wage bill's so different.
True, and it is a maxim that the wage spending within football really correlates to success, and particularly league position. The one thing you'd say about that in terms of United is that they've been the one counterpoint to that consistently, right? Never more so than this season.
You think wages correlate to success? We'll show you.
Exactly. It's like, actually, this is the rule that governs all football. Though United are so bad, they're still breaking that rule. It's like something, a force of nature, something completely out of nature. So, yeah, you would think that, right? But look, they're 16th in the Premier League, and so I think that says something. What I would say about this team is that they've got a good record in finals, right? And this group of players particularly. Obviously, the League Cup in Ten Hag's first season, but then particularly the FA Cup final at the end of last year, which feels like a real parallel to this game, just in terms of how much was riding of it, the time that it's arrived in the season, how it could perhaps change and colour perceptions of the season. I think the question, about them coming up against Premier League opposition, will it be different? Perhaps, potentially. Obviously, they haven't been playing that well. We are talking about a Spurs team that's 17th. They're not pretty good themselves.
They've one team that's worse than United.
The one team that's worse. That's in their favour here. The 3 games against Tottenham this season, look, I think you can look at them, you say the first one was under Erik ten Hag, different manager. Second one, Carabao Cup, I was at that game. It was a pretty chaotic game. It was unlike a lot of games that we've actually seen under Amorim so far. I think in a sense, Spurs sort of brought them down to their level, but it was a match play. It was like, I know that's tempting fate slightly, but it was almost like it was a very Tottenham game, if you know what I mean, and it felt like it was played on Tottenham's terms. I think that's a challenge for United in this game. And the third one in February, I mean, Laurie, you'll remember that United were absolutely decimated by injuries going into that game, and had basically the entire academy on the bench. Couldn't make a change until Chido Obi came on in the 90th minute, and that really limited Amorim's options in that game. It was a pretty poor game. Not much between the two sides. I don't think you can store too much on those past meetings this season. It's really quite a one-off. And again, if you can say one thing for this group of players at United, it's that in these one-off situations, they've often confounded expectations and actually come out on top. Yeah,
Laurie, how important is this for United's season? And I know there's still a lot of work to do in the background, but this one game, it all boils down to this. League position's been awful, season's not been that great, but you walk away with the European trophy, surely everything's great at Manchester United, surely, right?
Well, everything's great might be a stretch, but as on the podcast I was just on, we were discussing United's European finals, and there's not, for all the history that United have got, there's not that many. I mean, certainly winning ones, actually. So, they've won, I think, 5 trophies, which they raised on the mosaic before the game against Lyon to kind of remind people. But obviously, they've lost a few as well, to Barcelona a couple of times, and obviously to Villarreal and Gdansk in 2021. So I think whatever happens in the domestic season, if United go and win a European trophy, the fans will absolutely treasure it. This one I feel like more than, like I say, the 2017 one, just because they'll be able to enjoy it. I think the fans are there in the stadium mixing. In Gdansk it was COVID as well, so you had that kind of weird atmosphere where it sort of felt a halfway to a real event, and people will remember it. The people will, all the kind of journeys that they're going on to get there. It's difficult, right, to get to Bilbao. People are going to Biarritz and getting a bus. People are getting ferries, and that's actually just my two colleagues. Actually, I'm thinking of there. People are going by Marrakesh. People are going to Madrid and driving up. Like all kinds of different routes. So I think that all plays into then your memories of it. And if United are able to win it, then that will be cherished. Clearly, people know there are deep issues at the club, and Ruben Amorim is still struggling to get his team to a point that they understand what he wants and that it actually then is successful in Premier League. Clearly the transfer window is going to be very important. Who they bring in is going to be vital. Are they going to get it right? Those questions, there's still so many questions around the club, but ultimately football, I think, is about emotions and memories and winning trophies. And so I think if they're able to win this one, that will stand in people's memories for a long time.
I wonder what impact this game's going to have on what Amorim can do with Manchester United going forward, because obviously this isn't his team yet. There's still a lot of work to do in the summer, but to start your tenure with a trophy, I mean, come on, it's not bad, is it?
It's not bad. It's not bad at all. The league position's pretty bad. The trophy wouldn't be bad.
Look, I know. The weird thing is you just have to caveat it with the league position because it was so awful.
You do. I think this season... I remember us doing the pod immediately, like an hour after Ten Hag was sacked, right? And I think I might have even said on that the rest of the season is a write-off. Now, look, whether that was right or wrong, if you're going to end a write-off season with a European trophy, then that's pretty good, right? So I think take that into account. Obviously, this is huge for everything Laurie said. And I totally agree about the memories that it'll bring fans, etc. I think you only need to look at not just last year's FA Cup final, look at the FA Cup final this weekend and Palace and how much it meant to those supporters. It'll be the same for United supporters if they can have similar memories like that from this. It guarantees money as well, though, right? Forget about the memories for a second. The ones and zeros. You're talking 80 to 100 million pounds next season guaranteed from the Champions League, even if you crash out at the earliest possible opportunity. Now, we're talking about a club here that has really been through the financial ringer over the last year, that has had to make a lot of difficult decisions, a lot of painful decisions about people's jobs, that's had to go through restructure. And you've got Sir Jim Ratcliffe talking about, never mind the rebuild that you're talking about here, we've got to write a cheque for £89 million this summer if we sign nobody for players who are already through the door. If that's covered somewhat by qualifying for the Champions League, then that gives you more leeway and more room to actually do the building work that needs to be done. So I think it's hugely important from that perspective. But just as I started this answer by caveating it with the league position, you've got Amorim himself talking at the moment like, well, yeah, it'd be great if we win it, but also I don't know if we can handle Premier League and Champions League football at the same time. He's talking about how he needs midweeks in the middle of next season, time on the training pitch in order to get his methods across. So it really is a weirdly double-edged sort of thing. This that it's quite difficult to articulate, and I've been trying to write about this week. There's a pathway here where everything goes right for United on Wednesday night, and everything goes wrong for them next season, and people will look back and in hindsight say, well, maybe it would have been better if they hadn't, whatever. That's the difficulty here, and it's a real narrow path that Amorim has to try and navigate.
Well, that's the other thing as well, Critch. I just realised that if United don't win the Europa League, what does that also say about what Amorim is trying to achieve in this team moving into next season? Because then you definitely do end the season on a real low.
Yeah, precisely. I think, again, we've gone through all the financial stuff and what a difference it could make in the transfer market. And from the fan perspective, the memories, I think broader narrative-wise, which is what we deal in a lot in journalism when we're discussing this stuff, you want an idea, you want a sense of progress, you want a sense of forward momentum. That is absolutely critical. Rewind 12 months, right, to the end of that FA Cup final with Erik ten Hag. It was a trophy. It was a great day out. I don't think there was the same sense that the club was moving forward and in a united direction that I would like to think you would have if they win on Wednesday, right? I think Ruben Amorim still has enough grace, the fact that he's come in mid-season, that he's been given a very difficult, I was describing it as a write-off before, to turn that into a trophy, to turn it into Champions League qualification, even if it is through the back door of a different back door, having got through into the Europa League through the back door, then that is a sense of, well, there's progress here and we can build on this. But that is absolutely crucial, and I think for Amorim himself, that would be the biggest benefit from winning on Sunday more than anything else. On Wednesday, sorry, more than anything else.
Yeah, I guess one other positive potentially of getting Champions League football, Laurie, is that the kind of players Manchester United might be able to attract in the transfer market. And I don't know necessarily how much they've got to spend, but, you know, an injection of cash there. Also an injection of cash for winning Europa League. I know it's not a lot, but it's still cash, you know, at the end of the season when you've gone all season on this form. So, you know, potentially over the summer, those deals become a lot more easy to have if you say, yeah, we've got Champions League next season.
Well, I mean, Victor Gyökeres is the player that comes to mind instantly on that score, because there was this sense, certainly from a few months ago, you know, I was told it was unlikely that he would join United, and that was kind of a combination maybe of his exact profile and how much he might cost, but mainly his desires, I think, you know, to kind of test himself in the top competition. Obviously, he's played there for Sporting, but you know, to go further in it. And Ruben Amorim was asked about that over in Bilbao, where he basically said, "I only want players." I haven't spoken to Gyökeres. Obviously, he had brilliant success with him at Sporting, but I only want players that want to play for United and not just the competition. But obviously, if that is a major point and then United are in the competition, then it's easy to say, well, he wanted to come to United anyway, if they ultimately do sort of turn that one round, because obviously Arsenal are sniffing, and it seems like he is going to leave Sporting this summer. But yeah, I think that's an interesting one, just because he had so much success with Amorim. You can kind of, I could see United not wanting to go down that route because they've been there with Erik ten Hag and getting former players, but maybe, you know, Amorim is at a point where he needs that kind of clear idea about what a player would bring, and understanding that, and you know, confidence that it would work. Obviously, he hasn't played in the Premier League though. He played for Coventry in the Championship and did well. But yeah, so I mean that was, I've kind of gone on longer than I'd intended on that particular point. But yeah, totally, Ayo. I think the caliber of player that you can attract, it does change, right? It's just and I know that United might always have that kind of inherent ability to appeal to certain players, and maybe other players would still look at the Premier League form and think, well, come on, that's a disaster. I'm not going to go into that one. But I think if you've got that little cherry to offer as well, about playing against, you know, Real Madrid, Barcelona, whoever else they might end up drawing, then I think that is a compelling point.
All right, let's leave it there. Laurie, Mark, thanks for your time. And Laurie, thanks for munching your way through the podcast as well. And also thank you lot for watching as well. Do not forget to like the video and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Don't forget to leave us a comment as well. That's it for now. We'll be back soon. If you want to watch more episodes of the show, please subscribe to the channel. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season. If you'd like to listen to the episodes in full in audio form, search The Athletic FC wherever you get your podcasts from.